Good evening, everyone. Just imagine in the next 10 to 15 years, you're at church, your church, and you look to your left, you look to your right, and you realize that the place that you call home, the place that you go to for spiritual nurturing and development is empty. Or you look around and you see the composition of the church full of baby boomers or Gen Xers. Unfortunately, the church in general, and the African American church in particular, are headed to such realities. Over the past 5 years, the Pew Research Center and the Bonner Group, and scholars like Johannes Notes and Jacob Hammond have investigated the growing attrition rates of millennials in churches. As Sharon Cobbins argues, millennials are the future of the church, and they are needed for the survival of the church. In their 2015 survey of millennials, Pew researchers concluded that millennials are dropping out of churches for a number of reasons. First, millennials believe that pastors are not trustworthy. Millennials feel that growing scandals among church leadership, the lifestyle of pastors compared to congregants and community members, and the lack of service-related activities that emboldens the message of Christ to reach the lost, to feed the hungry, to provide shelter to the homeless, to love on humanity have made pastors untrustworthy. Second, millennials have a growing sense of a lack of community and relationship in churches. To them, churches are full of cliques and factions that are divisive and can potentially alienate and ostracize members that don't meet their expectations. They believe that pastors and church leaders are too busy with budgets and meetings and vision casting to spend quality time with them. And last, millennials think that churches provide no room for their gifts and skill sets. Because millennials embrace, as Giannis Bolda and Fernando Moore research suggests, a new knowledge work that is technologically driven. But yet churches, traditional churches, tend to be stuck in the past, with no space for millennials to use their talents to advance the gospel of Christ, to advance the mission of the church, and to advance the kingdom of God in a social media influenced and digitally focused age. And so if the church is to survive in this new era, it is imperative that a younger generation lead, grow, and shepherd local assemblies. Therefore, bold action is needed to recruit and retain millennials into African American churches. Having millennials as the new frontier of leadership requires that current leaders, like pastors, adapt a new way of thinking and doing. This new way, I believe, is expressed in the theoretical framework of kingdom leadership. A kingdom leader is one who understands, actualizes, and advances to another the ontological and phenomenological reign and rule of Christ in both thought and praxis. It is based off the teachings and message of Jesus about the kingdom of God, as well as his leadership style. Gene Wilkes and Ken Blanchard both called Jesus the greatest example of leadership in human history. As such, it's only befitting that his disciples and followers, such as pastors, follow his leadership pattern. And even though I'm proposing kingdom leadership as a new behavior approach, the concept itself is not new in the Christian community, as authors like Dr. Joe Stoll have presented its general theme as distinctive from other leadership approaches. More importantly, its themes of servantship and authenticity and stewardship are empirically valid through decades of research and can aid pastors and leaders in building trusting relationships, developing community, and delegating authority and responsibility. First, as kingdom leaders, pastors should embrace the tenets and practices of a Christocentric servanthood. Theorists like John Hutchison and Bill Thompson argue that Jesus' teaching in Luke 22 on the uniqueness of leaders as servants epitomizes both the paradox of Christian leadership and its countercultural premise. Additionally, Sans Zendaya and James Soros suggest that Jesus' demonstration of servanthood expressed in John 13, where he washed his disciples' feet, crystallizes this idea, this notion that Christian leadership, that the leadership of Christ is different from any kind of leadership, other kinds of leadership. In my interview with both an African-American pastor and an African-American millennial, I discovered that servantship is an essential quality for church leadership. The pastor suggested that his servant-like disposition was key to drawing millennials into his ministry. He serves and prepares them for leadership and works of service. In addition, the millennial asserted that servant-like qualities like humility, listening, and empathy were important in attracting and retaining her to the church that she attends. Second, pastors should reflect authenticity. Scholars like Sharon Norris have defended the idea that Jesus confirmed his authenticity by demonstrating and actualizing his call to serve others through genuine and compassionate acts of love. This idea correlates with the millennial in my case study who pointed out that transparency and genuineness were vital attributes in her life that helped her establish a trusting relationship and a trusting community with her pastor and also with the pastor's wife. And last, there is stewardship. Stewardship, unlike the previous themes, is simply not just our relationship with humanity, but it's also our relationship with God. If pastors see themselves not just as owners of churches or having some type of possessive quality of congregants, as if they are their members and as if they can say, this is my church. If pastors can identify the church as belonging to its true owner and true head, Christ, then they can be true stewards of God's resources and networks and relationships. As Darrell Kahn argues, to fulfill Matthew 28, 19, and 20, to make disciples out of all nations, not just some individuals, not just those who they feel comfortable with, but to make disciples out of all people. So there it is. 3 expressions of a kingdom leader that can be useful in addressing the needs of millennials, thereby creating more ministers, more leaders, and more servants to advance the gospel of Christ into the future and a future vibrant church. If pastors can understand the value of servantship, genuineness, and stewardship, they can effectively serve and shepherd the flock of Jesus Christ and meet the needs of a new and emerging society. Thank you.